So I wanted to introduce you to our speaker, Kat Halstead. So she is Crimson's Head of Academy Training. She is a certified business change leader with over 15 years experience in the technology sector. She has done a great job at growing our academy from scratch and bringing that to Crimson as well. The topic is around the growth mindset. So as all you could see on the website, I think a lot of you are interested in the topic, which is great. So I'm going to dig a little bit deeper into discovering how your mindset chooses the decisions that you actually make in life and what triggers your fixed mindset and how do you actually move to a growth mindset. And I guess just to help you understand the things that you've done so far and maybe how you can make some tweaks as well of that moving forward. So over to you, Kat.
Thanks, Keisha. I'm just doing a sound check. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, that's perfect.
Yeah, and just to excuse, I'm not having my video on right now either. I had real problems with the network on Teams yesterday, so I was a bit nervous that it would be cutting in and out. So I'll leave my camera off until we get to the questions and answers session, okay, if that's all right with everybody. And that gives everybody else the opportunity to do it too. So there's your get out of jail card. So we often see books, articles and podcasts with tips from the most successful people, and they usually include a whole list of unrelated points such as, you know, take more risks, be resilient, believe in yourself. But what they rarely do, is sort of explain the how. And a couple of you mentioned that that's what you'd like to get out of today, the how. How can you change to become that way, whatever that particular book is about? Now, we know exceptional individuals generally have a talent for identifying their own strengths and weaknesses. And those with a growth mindset share that talent and that ability to connect life setbacks to future successes. And that's sort of the key to someone that deals with failure in a positive way and those that allow it to sort of, you know, completely wash them over. So what I want to do this morning really is to introduce you to two mindsets. My caveat is I'm no expert, absolutely no expert. I've done a lot of research around it for developing our own academy, our apprentices that joined the organisation, and I've read a few books which I'll talk about at the end in case you want to explore a bit more. If you already understand growth mindset, this will hopefully be a good refresher for you. I know, Alison, I think you've said you've done some research around it, so I'll be really interested to see if I've missed any points that you've heard about, particularly about Microsoft. Particularly for those of you that have got teams, it's really important for you to understand, you know, if you've got someone within your team that is coming across with a fixed mindset, how can you encourage them to develop and move into a growth mindset? This session, it will hopefully show you how that fixed mindset can stand in the way of personal development for you and for your team, and that ability to change by affecting the decisions you take in your life. Importantly, and this is the important bit, I want to help you understand and identify triggers for fixed mindset and learn how you can become growth oriented in the future. So I'm going to play with tech a bit. Unfortunately, what I wanted to do on this call was to share a whiteboard that we could all collaborate on, but unfortunately Microsoft have not yet rolled it out outside of organisations, so we can't all partake in it. But what I can do is have a little play on here. So thinking about the first question, thinking about ability, let me just zoom out so you can see that a bit better. What I'm going to ask you now is, when you think about your ability, thinking about artistic ability. So we'll start with artistic, and this is the point at which you'll see how awful I am at writing. So let's say artistic, your artistic ability.
Kat, I can't see anything. I'm not sure if anyone else can see the...
Is that because I haven't shared my... Yeah, good point. This was the practice run, wasn't it? So this is when I have to share my whiteboard. So can you see it now?
Yes, that's perfect.
Great, thank you, Keisha.
Right.
So do you think artistic ability, and look, that's terrible writing, I'm going to have to redo that so you can actually read it. It's really hard to write on an upright laptop, I found. So artistic ability. So if you think about your artistic ability, and I'm going to rank this line here, 0 here, 100 here. I want you to think about, do you think your artistic ability is something that can be improved? And what I'd like you to do is call out a figure between 0 being not at all, 100 being yes, absolutely, I can improve my artistic ability. So for me, I would say I'm roughly about here. So what do you think?
Well, I'm rubbish, so I'm sure I can easily improve, but the improvement would still make me rubbish.
Yeah, I'm the same.
Yeah, I'm in that camp too.
So if you were going to give yourself a score in terms of how much you think you could improve it by, shout out a number.
90.
90, okay.
60.
40.
A 40,
Yeah,
a 60,
60.
which is about there. Yeah. 70, about there.
Mine would be 80.
80.
I bet you're amazing already, Shobha.
No.
Okay. Oh, sorry, was that another 70? 50. Okay, so we've got a range there. Has everyone spoken? Not that you have to, by the way. There's no mandated participation. Okay, so that's artistic. So we're going to move to singing.
Oh dear, they're water. I think that's even worse.
So singing for me, I have to say, is probably more around here. Yeah. How about you guys?
80.
80.
30.
50.
I used to work as a singer, so it's a little bit cheating for me, but there's always room for improvement.
So did you give a score? What was yours?
Sorry, is this sort of how much we can improve by? I'd probably say 40.
40.
If it's remembering words, I'm brilliant. The actual tone, it would be 80.
80.
Yeah, I'm 80 as well. I'm rubbish.
Okay. Cool. Okay. Right. So this one tends to be an interesting one. So athletic ability.
Oh, you're picking all my favourites.
So athletic ability, what do we think?
20.
20.
80.
I've got that already.
70.
40.
About 40 for me.
Someone said 100, did they?
Yeah, me.
Okay, and the final one, thank you for that, ladies. The final one. Intelligence. So, do you think intelligence is something that can be improved?
Yes.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
So shout out some scores.
90.
90.
60.
See, I was going to say no.
I was
okay.
Is that
I
you,
was
Laura?
I was going to say no as well, because I think knowledge can be improved.
Yes, yes.
But I think intelligence is something that is
it's innate, isn't it?
It's how you use that knowledge.
Yes, I agree, Shobha. That's, to me, that's what I was thinking. It's innate.
Yeah.
You know?
I
It's
agree.
like,
Interesting. Okay. Thank you for that, ladies. So I think what I wanted to get out of that exercise, let me just switch back to the slides so that I'm not talking without you being able to see what I'm sharing. It's this one. So I'll just double check that you can see. Sorry. Share. Okay, sorry, slight hitch. Can you see that slide?
yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so we'll move on to the next one. So yeah, what I wanted to get out of that exercise, and hopefully it has got across, that mindset is a spectrum, and you can adopt a fixed or growth mindset depending on the circumstances and triggers. We'll talk about the triggers a bit later. But so looking at the two mindsets, so I'll just give you a sort of light introduction. So if you think about a fixed mindset is based on a belief that intelligence is static and cannot be developed. Now, let me just go back to the it's a spectrum. So you're not, a lot of this I'll talk about in either fixed or growth mindset, but you are not, it's like all of these things that sort of label, you know, personality questionnaires, etc., etc. You're not one or the other. You can be predominantly one, but you tend to sort of switch between the two, depending on the challenges that you're facing. So fixed mindset is a belief that intelligence is static and cannot be developed. You either are or are not smart, and every situation is evaluated. Will I succeed or fail? Will I look smart or dumb? Will I be accepted or rejected? Will I feel like a winner or loser? Conversely, sorry, let me just hide this box. A growth mindset is based on the belief that a person's true potential is unknown and unknowable, that it's impossible to foresee what can be accomplished with years of passion, toil, and training. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
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 It does.
We're going to go into these in a bit more depth in a minute, but what I wanted to sort of draw out first of all is this question: is there something in the past which you feel has measured you? A test score, being rejected, an evaluation or criticism, anything that you feel was sort of a moment that measured you? And I want you to focus on it and feel all the emotions that go into it. And the reason I'm pulling this out is because in a fixed mindset, one moment, one task, one test, one evaluation can measure you forever. You feel like a failure, a loser, worthless or dumb, and everyone's better than me. And I'll give you an example of this. So at the time, I didn't realise this was a fixed mindset, but when I applied to do a master's at Cranfield University, I had to do an entry exam because I hadn't previously gone to university, and it was obviously a postgrad. And I went into this test, and I wouldn't say I didn't prep for it. I did a bit of prep for it, but probably not as much as I could have done. And lo and behold, I failed to get in, and I was absolutely crushed. And what I didn't recognise at the time, I was crushed because I was in a fixed mindset. I went into it thinking I'm not good enough to go to university. I'm not smart enough. And of course, when I failed, it sort of tapped into everything that I thought about myself. Now, at the time, I was very fortunate. I had a great mentor, finance director I reported to, and he just said, well, you just do it again. You regroup, you revise for it. And let me tell you, the entry exam included quadratic equations, so it's no wonder I hadn't done them for years. So I regrouped. I was lucky I sat next to a guy who was really good at maths, and he took me through all the formulas, all the approaches, and I retook it and I passed. But I have to say, for the next couple of years, I found that failure to get in the first time, I felt measured by it. I was then not as smart as everybody else that had gone onto that course. And it's only with time that now I look back and I can recognise that it was a fixed mindset. For me, intelligence is one of my triggers. So, question for the group: is there anyone that feels happy enough to sort of talk about something that's happened where they felt measured in the past?
I've got a kind of opposite, maybe not opposite, but more of a defensive mode, I think. And my situation's really similar to the one you've talked about, Kat. So
yeah,
I'm similar. I've got no formal education really. I left school partway through A levels, and I'm not a school learner. And I've kind of reignited my desire for education recently. I've done a leadership course internally and really enjoyed it. It's part of a Harvard business program and really enjoyed it. And it sort of reignited my passion. So I've done a similar thing in looking and really what I wanted to do was an MBA.
yeah.
And probably very similar conversations to those that you've had. What are your entry requirements, and obviously applying to a postgrad with no formal qualifications, you go down a very different route than a BAU route. And I think, and maybe it's not defensive, maybe it's more realist. I don't know the language, but what I've actually done is not gone straight for that MBA, almost because of that fear of failure. So almost that I'm not going to get there, so actually I'm not even going to target, and I'm going for a different degree. I think it's a level 5 or a level 6, so it will still get me a bachelor's, but I've sort of not dared to push the extra mile.
I think that's such a real thing, isn't it, that fear of failure, because you don't want to look stupid or sound stupid.
Yeah.
And your friends like, oh, I didn't get it, so you'd rather just go another route to get there. I totally
and actually I don't think I'm going down a wrong route. I'm still, it's a different step on the ladder, but then part of me still has this view that goes, do you know what, I know, like, it's not going to be a waste the next 3 years, but I know if I was to get on that MBA, I could nail it, but the problem is getting there.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talk about when we delve into sort of the fixed mindset, we talk about effort, and there's a reason that you shy away from effort. And I'll go into that in a bit more detail. But if you think about then putting yourself into the growth mindset, you look at honestly your role in that particular moment. But understand it doesn't define your intelligence or personality. The question is, do you let an experience define you, or do you control it? And the key is that you can choose. I failed does not mean I am a failure. And I think that's quite key. In a fixed mindset, I failed means I am a failure. But you can, what you can do is you can take each experience and you can use it as a basis for growth, and then carry that with you instead. So in my example, when I talk about that test, now looking back, I see that as a real pivotal for me, because it's a real good illustration of my fixed mindset, and it identifies for me that wherever I'm exposed potentially to be, you know, my intelligence is being exposed, I will revert to fixed mindset, and I've got to remind myself consciously to come out of that. So thank you for that example that you gave. So delving a bit more into the fixed and growth mindset. So fixed mindset, I've already said, is a belief that intelligence is static. And that leads to a desire to look smart. So there's a focus on performance, outcomes, and not looking bad. A fixed mindset prefers effortless success, right? So we were talking about effort earlier. It's a focus to be, you know, successful without any effort. The best way is to prove your talent is without effort, and you're constantly looking for validation. And if your claim to fame is that you're a genius, then talent can reduce you. Genius is not supposed to need effort. And so if we look at effort is useless, unnecessary, because you don't believe that you can develop or grow. There's no point with making any effort. And the whole point is, if you do put in effort, you lose that excuse, because without effort you can say I could have been, and you can't say that if you put in 100% effort, and that's why you shy away from it. This is kind of the sort of the thoughts that are going underneath. When you think about challenges threaten your ability to look smart, and so again you see them as a threat, and you'll easily back down. You don't want to be exposed. Again, if you look back to effort is only for people with deficiencies. Challenge, you'll absolutely try and avoid, because you don't want to be exposed. And likewise, mistakes expose your weaknesses and undermine your ability to look smart. So you'll be discouraged by mistakes, and you'll do everything to avoid them or find excuses for them. So that's quite a key thing. You'll either avoid it, or you'll make excuses as to why something's happened, rather than focusing on the point around a mistake can show you where you need to grow or develop. Now, criticism, I feel this quite strongly. Criticism can be taken very personally, and you'll be quite defensive. You'll find it unhelpful and sometimes hurtful. And as a result, people with a fixed mindset can plateau early and fail to achieve their full potential. And this confirms their deterministic view of the world. They also will feel threatened by the success of others. So in a fixed mindset, you don't want to be surrounded by successful people, because it kind of shows that you're not as successful as them. So looking more to a growth mindset, by adopting a growth mindset, again, we talked about that, you know, intelligence, your belief is that intelligence can be developed. So this leads to a desire to learn, because there's a focus on the process of actually getting better. In terms of effort, because you believe in that ability to develop and learn, you're happy to put in 100% effort. You know it will lead to growth, and you embrace challenges for the same reason. Believing talent can be developed will allow people to fulfill their potential. And mistakes, unsurprisingly, people in a growth mindset will use them to learn. They don't find them discouraging. They find actually identifies where their gaps are to focus on. And likewise, criticism
is now exiting.
Mistakes are used to help you learn, and you appreciate and use criticism to grow and develop. You don't take it personally. You see it as that focus on where you need to grow and develop. And also they find lessons and inspiration in the success of others. They're not threatened by others. They see being amongst smart people. I think a couple of ladies on the call today enjoy being amongst, you know, other smart women because it helps you grow and develop. But growth mindset doesn't mean everything that can be changed should be changed. It's the starting point for change, but you do need to decide for yourself where effort towards change would be most valuable. So when we think about stereotypes, I thought it'd be quite interesting to talk about this. So in a fixed mindset, stereotypes represent a shrinking sense of belonging. So negative stereotypes say you and your group are permanently inferior, but only people in the fixed mindset would resonate to this message. So in fixed mindset, when you're given a positive label, you're afraid of losing it, and when given a negative label, you're afraid of deserving it. So a stereotype of low ability, for example, you know, women in STEM, is able to invade a fixed mindset, and it takes away confidence and comfort. And there's some really interesting research around stereotypes. For example, there was some research done that said if you just put more men in a room with a female taking a maths test, it will lower the woman's test score and lower it by quite a lot if there weren't men in the room. And if you consider how children grow up, boys are constantly being scolded and punished and pushing the boundaries. And I say this as a stereotype in itself. I think things are changing. I think certainly in the learning industry, people are recognizing much more about growth mindset. So if we talk about sort of the past historically, you know, boys, there'd be a lot of rough and tumble and constantly name calling, slob, moron, idiot, loser. I hear it with my boys. And what that means is the evaluations lose a lot of their power. And research has shown as well that boys will receive up to 8 times more criticism than girls for their conduct. By contrast, girls are seen as well-behaved, cute, helpful, and they delight in everyone telling them they're cute. And because of that, they learn to trust people's estimates of them. Everyone is nice to me, so if they criticise me, it must be true. And what we found is the fixed mindset plus women's trust in opinions, because of that, trusting in their valuations, contribute to the gender gap in STEM. When people are in a growth mindset, by contrast, the stereotype doesn't disrupt their performance. It allows you to see prejudice for exactly what it is, which is just someone else's view of you. And it also allows you to confront that with confidence and abilities intact. You don't believe in permanent inferiority. And if you're in a growth mindset, and if you are actually behind in an aspect of your skill or development, you'll work harder and seek to catch up. And I think this pulls to the whole fact, I mean, we know as women in STEM, maths and science need to be much more hospitable places for women, and women need all the growth mindset they can to take their rightful places in these fields. And as female leaders in tech, you know, don't underestimate the value that you all can bring, not only as positive role models, but to coach junior females within your sort of network. So another question for you. Can you recall a time when you were struggling to overcome a challenge, or when you decided to learn something new that was hard for you? So I've got a couple of questions here just to pose. So did you have any moments when you felt discouraged? Did you have a negative voice telling you to give up at any point? If so, what helped you persevere? So is there anyone that wants to sort of talk about, you know, that negative voice? What was the negative voice they heard and what helped them persevere?
I mean, I'm sort of, it's a little bit different. I mean, I've got, the thing that I have a big issue with is I have I'm obsessed with worrying about what people think about me. So I'm less about I can't do it, but I'm much more about what people see of you know, what I do. Do you see what I mean? So I sort of, I'm not so much discouraged about I can't do it, but I'm ridiculously concerned about what people think. And I inherited that from my mother, who was always saying, what will the neighbours think? Don't make a noise. Can't have people complaining. You know, and that's my sort of fixed mindset, is which I recognise.
So you hear that voice. How do you counter that? So you recognise that that voice is there. So how do you challenge yourself not to listen to it?
because I know it's not, what's the right word? If that was a continuum, it's right up at the 90 to 100, when realistically I should care back down in the sort of 40s, 30, 40, 50. So I know that, but
Yeah.
That's about as far as I've got. I recognise it, I know it, but I'll still shout at my son to shut his window and turn his music down, because the neighbours will be annoyed.
Yeah, and absolutely. And if you think about that thought in the growth mindset, then you would recognise that what other people think of you is just an opinion, and it's not the sort of the final word. In a fixed mindset, you would listen to other people's opinions, and that it would be the actual evaluation. So I think a lot of this stuff is around, we talk about when we go on and talk about triggers and sort of the steps to move into a growth mindset. It's about awareness, and the fact that you're aware of that negative voice is sort of half the battle. When you're not aware of it, and there are unconscious sort of thoughts that go on behind the scenes, it's when you're not aware of them and you're in an automatic mode, that's when it's very, very difficult to sort of to change your mindset.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Do you want another example?
Yeah, that would be great. Yes.
I think my struggle between fixed and growth mindset is kind of deep rooted in, I think, imposter syndrome, really, which is where I'm constantly questioning whether I'm good enough to do things, not necessarily at what people think, but the quality of what I do. Is it good enough for people? So I struggle to kind of sell myself on that, because I worry that I'm not any more experienced, any better than other people. So and that does lead me to feel discouraged sometimes, but then I do have to give myself a bit of a talking to and try and break myself out of it. But that's what helps me persevere.
Yes. Now there's a model called the ladders of inference, and I don't know whether any of you have heard of this. I found it particularly useful for the imposter syndrome. And as we all know, the imposter syndrome it affects men and women, but it's generally more predominant in women. And I think perhaps because of the that focus on recognizing other people's evaluations, etc. And women in tech, obviously working as a minority in an industry that's male dominated. But the ladders of inference is about, when you hear that negative voice, going back to what evidence is there to support the voice that I'm hearing. So, for example, that voice of I'm not good enough, or, I'm not as smart as, or, this presentation that I'm giving is rubbish and everyone thinks it's rubbish. Where's the evidence to support that? And I think that's a really, really helpful marker to introduce. So you're already, again, the fact that you're aware of that negative sort of narrative that's going on is half the battle. The next step is, how do you change it? And you change it slowly, and we talk about this a bit later anyway, but it's not a one fix. It's a slowly, you change your sort of automatic conditioning of thoughts to, instead of just saying I'm rubbish, you hear the narrative I'm rubbish, and then you challenge it by saying, hold on a minute, yeah, I laugh at myself, I think I'm rubbish, but where's the evidence to support that? And then you learn to recognize, well, actually there's no evidence, and this is just the way I'm thinking about myself, and you can start to move on. Does anyone else want to reflect on a challenge?
I think mine is a very personal one, because it's growing up, it's family, it's I didn't do my A levels. I managed to get into teacher training college for a year, but then left for personal reasons, because basically I left home. My parents were both professionals. My husband's a professional. My brother's a professional, and they do not understand what I do. And so because they don't understand it, it's completely insignificant. I still get it. I was saying to Mum yesterday, I've got some work to do. Oh, don't tell me about that. It's rubbish.
Wow.
And it is really difficult, because I haven't got any paper qualifications. Everything I do is because I've learned to do it through experience. And part of me is quite proud about that.
Absolutely.
it still makes me feel, you know, I was writing a guide the other day and I sent it out to a couple of people for them to look at. And I'm just amazed when I read back to it and I think, did I write that?
That's
sorry,
fabulous.
Mine is my mindset is very much more on a personal than an actual qualification learning one, but I'm learning, it's emotional rather than practical.
Yeah, but of course, you know, if you were solely in the fixed mindset, you would hear someone say, I can't remember what you specifically said that your mum said, but oh, I don't want to hear about that. If you were in a fixed mindset, you would be completely crushed by that. So you must react in a growth mindset, because you recognize, actually, okay, I haven't got the qualification, but through experiential learning, you know, I can do X, Y, and Z, and that's fantastic. And I think the very fact that you're aware of it and you confront that narrative is really important.
But it's still really disheartening every time.
Absolutely. Yeah, it can be crushing. It can still be crushing. But the difference between a fixed and a growth mindset is with a fixed mindset, it would crush you and you would feel like a failure. With a growth mindset, you don't feel it so all encompassing. It can still hurt, it can still crush you, but you can see it for what it is, which is someone else's view of you, and it doesn't define you. So thank you for sharing that very personal challenge there.
The way that I look at that as well, Shobha, is that you definitely would have a growth mindset and seem to have, because if you didn't, you wouldn't have gone and done what you wanted to do. You would have continued to go on with the path of your family and your parents. So you've obviously got the mindset, you know, a strong mindset in that sense.
Absolutely, yeah. So you'll have all seen the iceberg before. I just want to talk about moving on to sort of changing your mindset now. So, you know, that means challenging your perspectives. We talked about that a bit. You know, our thoughts, opinions, values and beliefs are often so deeply ingrained that it's difficult or even uncomfortable to start that process. But I think from, you know, what you've shared on the call already, a lot of you are very aware of some of this narrative, negative narrative that's there. The iceberg is very, very commonplace when we're discussing our thoughts, behaviours and their impact. So thinking about the tip of the iceberg, that's the 10% floating above the surface. We have visible results, and these might be, you know, successful results, or they might be failures. You might have landed the job of your dreams, or you might have flunked an exam like I did. And below the surface, you have the remaining 90% of the iceberg, and that represents everything the world doesn't see. You know, this is everything that goes into the outcome. We have hard work, positive self-talk, you know, and so forth. Or we might have deeply set beliefs that unconsciously shape our behaviours. Thinking, for example, what's the point in studying anymore? I can't do any better. Versus, you know, thinking about hard work and repeated effort and telling yourself, I've got it in me. Let's try again, but work smarter. And by confronting these hidden beliefs with questions, we stand a much better chance of developing a growth mindset. So some of the sort of thoughts, and this is just some examples that you might hear, and how you could challenge them, because that's the key in moving from sort of a fixed to a growth mindset. So, you know, an example, I tried, I failed, it's just beyond me. So the question you can challenge back is, could I try a different strategy or approach? I didn't achieve what I set out to, I failed, I'm a failure. The challenge back is, isn't learning a process, and isn't failure just part of that process? I just wasn't born clever. Well, is anyone born clever? Haven't others tried and succeeded through hard work? It's recognition that, you know, that intelligence is not static. Do you think you can do it? Can I do it with repeated effort? So you'll always question whether you can do something, but it's focusing on, you know, if I put enough effort in, I'm much more likely to succeed than if I don't. I don't know how or if I'll get there ever. Well, what plan can you make to get there? How can you motivate yourself to follow that plan? What's my first step? And I've read somewhere with things like, you know, self-improvement things, a lot of it is around, if you write it down or make a plan, you're much more likely to succeed. And that's why things like Weight Watchers succeed, because you're publicly, you know, I've never done it, by the way, but you're publicly going and declaring what your weight is, and then, you know, you've got a target that you want to meet. And research suggests that if you write it down and if you share it, you're much more likely to achieve that target. So plan is really important. So moving on to the steps to a growth mindset, it's 3 easy steps. And if anything, if there's anything you take away from today's session, this slide is probably the key one. So first of all, learn to identify your fixed mindset in a dialogue. So a few of you have already shared, you already know it's there. You know the sort of negative narratives that's happening in your mind. So that's the first step, is being aware of it. So things like I can't, it's too difficult, I'm going to fail and look dumb, so I will avoid this, worrying about what other people think of you, I'm not a professional, I don't have any academic qualifications. That's all that sort of negative narrative that's happening behind the scenes. So the next step is recognizing that mindset is a choice. You don't have to, you obviously have to listen to that dialogue, but you don't have to believe it. So you can choose how to respond to criticism. A mistake does not make me a failure. I failed does not make me a failure. And a really important one and so simple is I can't, adding yet on the end to it, I can't yet. And we'll talk a bit about this with children and how you move to, encouraging a growth mindset with children. I think that adding that one word on the end for a child is really important. It gets them to recognise, actually, no, I can't do it, but I can. There's the potential there. And then the third step is practicing a growth mindset approach. So this is the challenging back, focusing on effort and perseverance, and always thinking about, well, what are the opportunities for today for learning and growth for me and those around me? And one of the things you can do, if it's very new to you, is at the end of each day, take a few moments to think, well, what have I learned today? Where have been the opportunities for growth for me today? And how can I share that with those around me? And I think that's really important, that transparency as well. So as leaders, we talk about transparency and authenticity being a strong leadership quality. And I think it's because it shows sort of the junior members of our team, actually, that we're not perfect, that we are in being human, we make mistakes and there are errors, but we learn and we grow from them. Has anyone got any questions around this slide? Because this one's quite key and it's very, very simple, and it seems, it's not a one fix, it's something that will take time, but the sort of underlying research is cognitive behavior therapy. It's recognition of those sort of negative narratives, and then recognizing that you have a choice, you don't have to listen to it, and then moving on by challenging those negative narratives, looking for the evidence that maybe supports it. Like I mentioned about, what's the evidence to support that you're rubbish, or you're not, you're not as articulate or as, professional as you might be led to believe.
I think it's a really good slide, and actually I've got a 25-year-old son who's got some real issues, unfortunately. That's another story, but I was looking at this thinking I might well play the whole presentation to him, even though it's targeted more at women. I think there's a lot of good messages here, and this is a really good slide.
I have to say that since learning more about the growth mindset, I practice it with my 9-year-old son, definitely more in the fixed mindset when it comes to learning. And I'm continually asking the question, what have you learned today? And, we have a joke at the dinner table about, right, what's everyone learned today? What did you learn at school? Nothing. Well, what a waste of time that was. What challenges did you have today? What mistakes did you make today? So it's sort of getting you more comfortable with, actually mistakes aren't bad. They're an opportunity to learn.
I really like it. Right.
And the key is, why waste time proving over and over again how great you are, which is that fixed mindset, when you could be getting better? Why hide deficiencies instead of overcoming them? And why look, now this is a key one, why look for friends or partners who will just shore up your self-esteem instead of ones who will challenge you to grow? And that's why I smiled when I heard so many of you talk about, I love being amongst, women who are articulate and professional and smart. I use the word smart in inverted commas because I don't believe you're either smart or not. But it's about seeking out challenges and experiences that will stretch you. And that's part of that growth mindset, recognizing we're not perfect, any of us, and we've all got that opportunity to grow. So you mentioned your son. So what's really interesting is, the research that's been done about labelling children. So, you know, in the past, you might have labelled a child smart, clever, clumsy, arty, adventurous, you know, cat-handed. My brother was always called cat-handed, and it was only when he was sort of, as an adult, he realised, actually, I'm not cat-handed, but mum always used to call me cat-handed. But research has shown that labels lower a child's IQ for those with a fixed mindset actually lowers their IQ. So telling kids they are smart makes them feel dumber and act dumber, but claim they are smarter. So in a fixed mindset, a child would lose confidence when they make mistakes. And thinking about teenagers, well, it's one big test. Are they smart or dumb? Are they good looking or ugly? Are they cool or a nerd? Their main goal is to do things as easily as possible so they don't have to work hard. In a fixed mindset, their focus is on mobilising their resources, not for learning, but to protect their egos. But in a growth mindset, of course, it doesn't make sense to stop learning. For them, adolescence is a time of opportunity to learn new subjects, a time to find out what they like and what they want to become in the future. So they focus on learning and developing and understand that defects are things that you can work on. So what can parents do? Well, it's about finding a growth mindset way to praise them. So focus on the effort. What did they learn rather than just the outcome? Talk about mistakes and how they can learn from them rather than focusing on the punishment. So find a growth mindset way to compliment them. So, you know, a simple example, you know, your child's painted a really great picture, you know, it's about, wow, I can see you've put a lot of effort into that. You know, there's a lot of detail. Wow, how did you learn how to do this? You know, that must have been quite challenging. How did you learn to do the colours, paint, you know, mix those colours together? Because then the child is seeing a recognition of the effort that's gone into it, not just, wow, that's a fantastic picture, let's put it up on the fridge. Because then that's all about the outcome and not recognising and acknowledging the effort that's gone into it. Does that resonate with some of you?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Great.
Yeah.
And by the way, I learned this because I was on a call with a wonderful author called Valerie Young, who wrote Secret Thoughts of Successful Women. And if you suffer with imposter syndrome, I would definitely recommend that book. And I was on a call with her, and one of the things she talked about is, you know, this labeling. And up until that point, I thought I was doing the right thing by saying to my children, wow, you're so smart. And I almost blushed when she said, you know, she talked about the impact that has, and immediately it took me a while to stop calling my children smart, I must admit, because I'd almost been, you know, brainwashed into thinking it was the right thing to do, but now I don't, and I've got more into the habit of, you know, recognizing the sort of effort that goes into things rather than, you know, talking about being smart or intelligent.
Well, I'm embarrassed to tell you on that, you know, a very short story. I fell into that trap with my son because he was on the talented and gifted register. And I was always telling him how brilliant he was, and his teachers were always telling him how he was going to, you know, be 5 A stars. He'd also been diagnosed ADHD, so he had a label that told him that he was the one who was always being naughty. And he deliberately didn't do his GCSEs, didn't try, failed them all, didn't get his A-level place, has been in and out of unemployment, and absolutely thinks he's a failure and cannot see how he's going to get out of that.
So I'm going to I'll recommend a book at the end that I would definitely think you should read and he should read, because it talks about children with high IQ and high intelligence, and how actually the way society has treated them and their experiences can actually undermine their confidence and lower their IQ. And I think, you know, if he's 25, again, it's about recognition of why you're the way you are, and it might actually unlock him and help him realise there's a better way. So I'll talk about the book in a minute. I think this is very timely for you. And listen, don't feel guilty as parents. You know, there's enough things to feel guilty about. Please don't feel guilty about it, because, you know, this is as society has learned and taught us. And it's only more recently that schools are recognising that actually growth mindset is so important because of some of the research that's happening. So it's never too late, is my argument. It's never too late.
Indeed, I agree.
And I go back to this really simple, I can't yet. And I think, you know, growth mindset's not a declaration, it's a journey, one that involves small progressive shifts in thinking rather than huge leaps. And most people aren't either fixed or growth, but somewhere in between. And as Carol Dweck says, an author that I'm going to talk about in a minute, no one has a growth mindset in everything all the time. Everyone is a mixture of fixed and growth mindsets. You could have a predominant growth mindset in one area, but there can still be things that trigger you into a fixed mindset. And again, it's about that awareness of what those triggers are. This is one of my favourite quotes: develop a passion for learning. If you do, you will never cease to grow. And I think that's in everything you do. Try and approach it. Even on this webinar today, I was a little bit nervous. I haven't done a webinar before. And the old me, the fixed mindset me, would have gone, oh my God, it's just going to show how I don't know enough about growth mindset. You know, I'm going to fail. I'm going to not be able to use the whiteboard. I'm going to mess up and everyone's going to laugh at me. You know, challenge myself to move into the growth mindset and say, you know, if all of that happens, it's a good test, it's a good trial run, and it shows authenticity to the women on the call that nobody's perfect. Because, you know, there's a lot of research around, you know, women put in so undergraduates, you know, this real pressure to be perfect in looks, perfect in personality, perfect in, you know, scholarship. And actually there's a huge amount of, you know, pressure on them. And this is not just women now, it's men as well, you know, because you know, there's equal pressures on them. And sometimes I think, you know, sexes don't know what they're supposed to be anymore. You know, in the old days it was, you know, very clear blue and pink, and now it's a lot harder for individuals to know what's expected of them, I guess. And I think with that you've got this increase in you know mental health issues. So, you know, if we can encourage that passion for learning, you know, nobody is perfect. We've all got room for improvement. We've all got that opportunity to grow. Mentioned this book. I've got two books that I'd recommend if you're interested to know more. So Mindset by Carol Dweck. Funnily enough, it was actually an Amazon recommendation for me, and normally I sort of poo-poo them and like, no, I'm not taking one of those, but I read it, I looked at the reviews and I was like, yeah, actually I'm quite interested in that, and I'd say it's one of the best books I've ever read. Very, very timely. It's got case studies in it. If you're looking to share this with some of your teams, I would say definitely read it. It's an easy read. And it's got a whole host of stuff in it. This presentation I've built around what I've learned in this book. If you read it, you'll say, oh yeah, I remember her talking about that. You know, it's almost verbatim. I've lifted some of the topics. And the other one, if you haven't already heard about it, the chimp paradox, which is all about how to manage your mind. So thinking about, you know, those automatic thoughts that you have and how you can challenge them to sort of change that. And that's the end of my presentation. I really thank you for joining me. I think I'm going to hand over to Keisha just to open up for, oh no, I'm doing questions if you've got any more questions. Sorry. You see, I can make mistakes.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you, Kat. Yeah, we've got some time now for questions, and if anyone wants to use this time to ask questions or even just thoughts on your mindset and where you've got to where you are now, and if you're struggling with anything at the moment. So we've been open so far, so we might as well carry on. If anyone wants to ask anything or talk around anything, we've got a bit of time.
And if it's been useful as well, I mean, has it given you sort of the motivation you talked about, and, you know, some of the content that you could use to share with your teams? I know Alison, and I've lost my sheet which had all the names on, but Alison and your colleague, you mentioned wanting to roll this out with your organisation. Teresa, that's it, yes.
Yeah, really helped. I think the link into some of the CBT stuff that you were just alluding to is quite useful. It is about the thoughts, and actually yes. We've promoted both of those books, Carol Dweck's. Most people in our teams have read the Carol Dweck book. It's really good. I would recommend it as well.
Yeah.
And Paradox again is really useful. But I'd not made the connection between CBT and how to control your thoughts. So I guess that's really good. Yeah, I've written loads of stuff down from mind map.
Fabulous.
It's really useful. Thank you. Obviously, I can't see the slides, but when they come out, it'll be great.
Yes.
But yeah, thank you.
I think for me, it's been interesting. I read the Chimp Paradox. I haven't read the other books you mentioned, but I think it's interesting. At the back of the current situation, people will have had to challenge themselves to have more of a growth mindset in the current climate. Whether they like it or not. And I think trying to continue that, particularly with customers that I deal with, to sort of continue to challenge that in their organisations and not go back to, well, we can never deliver things quickly, there's too much governance, blah, blah, blah. I think we need to really, from my point of view, that's really important in my selling to customers.
Absolutely. I think That's a really important topic, and indeed challenging your organisations as to how can we continue to grow as an organisation. What do we need to do, rather than lament about, you know, what it used to be like in the past.
Definitely. I think this time has taught everyone, hasn't it, that we have to react quick and think on our feet, but also have, like you said, have that growth mindset. So whether that's personally and within organisations. So I feel like the companies that are going to do really well now, and the people within roles, are going to be the ones that are thinking on their feet, thinking how can I elevate into that next level, and then just going for it as well, and not having that fear of failure, which I think a lot of us have maybe had in the past or sometimes still struggle with.
And by the way, that's okay. That's what makes us human.
I think one of the harder points is when you're like me and you're working on your own, and you don't necessarily have the support around you, or you've got different challenges. You know, it's not just the people in your team or the business that you're working in, but you go in as a consultant, you work with other people, so you've got to have a different mindset when you go in as a consultant anyway. And then it's trying to put together all of these bits that you know you should know about, but don't actually practice them because you've got other things to think about. I know I'm not making sense properly, but I hope you're getting some of what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if I could try to identify, are you saying that because you're isolated, so you're not part of a team, it's a lot more challenging for you?
Yes.
Yeah.
I can definitely relate to that, and I'm coming to the conclusion I probably am a career employee because I really like to be part of something. And although I've had some fun this last 6 months or so, you know, in interim and consulting and advisory, and I like helping people, but I absolutely resonate with what Shoba's saying. I'm energized by people. I like to be part of something. It is tough to do that if you're effectively not in that team that's growing together.
Absolutely. And I guess that's why forums like this are really important, particularly if you're self-employed or you're working as a consultant and mostly on your own. It's sort of reaching out to others, like-minded, sharing best practice and support, and actually just having someone there to listen and to understand and to help you grow.
Definitely.
Thank you, ladies.
That's been really good. Thank you. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
Hi, Madeline.
Yeah, likewise.
Joined a little bit late because you told me, so don't worry about that. Was that useful to you as well?
Yeah, it was really interesting. I'm kind of in a different position to a lot of you on the call, where I'm relatively early in my career. So I've only been at BT for 2 years, so that's kind of the first full-time job that I've had. But I think there's definitely that kind of imposter syndrome. I've been called like a glorified PA and stuff like that when I first started. So yeah, thinking about how I can challenge that and kind of use that as a bit of a momentum to prove people wrong, rather than just kind of thinking, oh, maybe that is all I can do and I can't.
I think me and Naomi have talked around this before, being in a recruitment role. Well, obviously I was a past recruiter or a sales role anyway. We've had it from guys in the team. I don't get it as much anymore. I think you can still get it, but they're like, oh, they just do well with business because they're a woman or that. And you do just kind of feel a little bit, at the time, it kind of takes you a little bit back, like, oh, so all the work I'm doing doesn't actually mean anything. But it's just kind of navigating your way through that and realising it isn't actually the case. So no, Naomi, we were talking around it, weren't we? And it's these kind of comments, it's trying to just put them to you back of your mind and just use it like as motivation.
Well, it just makes you furious, doesn't it? Comments like that. And I think the challenge is, especially early in your career when you're a little bit uncertain about your abilities, these comments can be crushing. They can absolutely crush and affect your future career. And I think that's why it's important, particularly as, senior female leaders, to support those juniors in your team, because it's really tough. It's really tough early on in your career, and I'm sure it resonates with all of you. And even now, in a male-dominated industry, we really have to muster all of the growth mindset. We've got to face challenges like that. Fortunately, I think they're getting less and less, but they still exist. And one throwaway comment like, oh, you know, Kat, you can go and get the tea, you know, you're the pink one, you know, just a subliminal comment can completely undermine you. And what's really important is, you know, consciously challenge it back, recognize it for what it is. It's their, you know, their insecurity, their prejudice, their lack of you know, intelligence, actually, quite frankly.
Yeah, and I think what's so good about both the chimp paradox, the imposter syndrome book by Valerie Young, I thought that was amazing, but that they help you so much outside of work as well. It's not just in work. It's not, and you know, for me running the chimp paradox helped me massively to stop those sort of negative thoughts throughout races, you know, when people are passing you by and you start to sort of doubt yourself and your ability. I think that's what's so good about them as well, that they can link to everything you do, which is really good.
So thank you. I don't think anyone's got any other final comments or questions, but if you do, your time is now. If not, we'll wrap up there. Perfect. So I'll take that as everyone hasn't got any questions now. So thank you for that. So we post all of our events on our website. So the link is there, crimson.co.uk/events. We will be posting our next Women in Tech virtual event soon. So that'll probably be within a couple of weeks' time. I'll confirm dates shortly. And then when we can go back to live events, we will let you know. And it'd be nice to see you all in person and see some of the regular faces too. And if you'd like to talk about maybe speaking at one of our forums, then we are open to conversations of speakers. So please do get in touch. I would like to hear from you. And I think it's good sometimes to lead a conversation, and it's sometimes good to add to the conversation. So if you're open to doing that as well, just let me know. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Kat. That was brilliant.
Pleasure. And I would love to get feedback as well, if anyone's able to share, you know, their feedback from the event and how we could improve it, of course. How could we improve it?
Really well done, girls. It's been brilliant. Very
fabulous. It's been really motivational. Thank you.
Yeah, really.
And one final, thank you for the feedback already, but one final question. Are you happy with the morning slot of the session? Do you think that works quite well?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, yes.
I think the answer, Keisha, is yes, as long as we don't have to have our cameras on. Is that right, ladies?
No, well, that's perfect. Thank you for that. Usually, obviously, the wine tasting things are on the evening, but we thought we'd try a breakfast session because I think when we're all at home and on the phone all day, by the time the evening comes, I don't actually think people want to log on onto these type of things. So we thought we'd try the breakfast ones for the virtual event. So glad it worked well.
I'm going to make one comment. I think that we run this again in 6 months' time and we all have our cameras on because we're not unhappy about showing who we are.
I love that idea.
That's a good idea. I like that.
Sooner than that, show, but so well, yeah, we'll give everyone some prep to get themselves ready.
Keisha, I just wondered if anyone has any sort of topics that they'd like us to discuss in the future, if there was anything, any other topics that they want to hear about, really.
I've seen some comments on here. I've not seen any topics. Yeah, while we're on the call, has anyone got anything else that you're interested in learning about, speaking about?
We have got some ideas, but yeah, we just wondered. We usually ask different. We usually ask, to be honest, the speakers for their ideas. So, you know, Kat's got loads of different ideas. We've had Microsoft speak in the past. We've had different change consultancies speak in the past. So I'd ask them for ideas. But if anyone's got right now things that you are interested in or would like to, you know, you've got it on your mind, but you don't know who to talk to about, have you got anything like that? Putting you on the spot.
I mean, I just like these sorts of things. I said, well, you know, my intro, I just love the things that help you improve who you are. You know, I did a course once where, you know, they said, have you ever had difficult people? And I said, oh, of course I have. And there's no such thing as a difficult person. There's just opportunities to improve. But it's true. It is true. Yeah, so I like this. I love these sorts of topics most of all. You know, the other stuff, you kind of do that as part of the job, I think.
Yeah, that's it. I think it's about delving a little bit deeper into actually you as a person. I think some of the things you do for your job, like you said, and that's more around everyone else. But when it's about you personally and how you can better yourself, I find that most interesting.
Yes.
And also at this level, you kind of most often have teams, so it's how to bring them up as well and kind of be on the same journey with you, because you're only as strong as your team, as they say. So, and I guess even as a consultant, you're still going in having to delegate and manage stakeholders. So that kind of thing we've had topics on, and how to, it's kind of been a bit more interesting, but how to not just how you don't just be seen and actually be heard. Don't just talk, be heard. Can't even get my words out, but basically how to get your point across, but in a positive way, that you actually are listened to.
I mean, I guess now that we've had a moment for it to filter through, one of the things that I do definitely find hugely challenging is how to deal with people who I just cannot get any rapport with. So 99% of the world, I like to think generally I can get on with, but people, and they're often very mature, established male chief execs, chairman. I sometimes find that very hard to find that connection in order to have a great dialogue, because they don't really care about IT, a lot of them.
Yeah. And it's like as much as you try, it's what going wrong with this, but you're not going wrong. It's just what little tips that you can.
Yeah, because I'm not a great fan of sports or the arts, so it's that kind of like, what do I talk about other than the job, So that's
okay. Well, I've wrote that one down. So rapport building. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting topic, actually. I think everyone, whether you're in a sales role, whether you're in a a head of business type role or a technology leadership role, it's all about building relationships, isn't it, and that rapport. And sometimes you just can't, but little tips to maybe make it a little bit easier.
Yeah.
Have you all, as a question for you, have you all covered off imposter syndrome? Do you all understand it, and have you attended sessions around it?
Not formally, no. So I know what it is, but actually, no, as a topic, it's not one that I've actually paid any great attention to, other than being aware of it. And I don't feel that, except in these small instances, but they're usually very important instances.
Yes, yeah. So perhaps
I think for me, it's a key area, definitely something I'd be interested in. It was going to be one of the areas that I would have spoken up and said that I'd be interested in attending at a future date. I find I suffer terribly with imposter syndrome at times, and I will have that side of me that will decide, right, no, I'm going to face this on, I'm going to prove it wrong, I'm not going to let it get to me, but it will sneak back in there. So yeah, certainly of interest for me.
Yeah, it'd be the same for me.
But that's two topics.
The other area I'm quite interested in, and I guess from hearing from more experienced people, because it's still fairly new to me, is kind of leadership. So women in leadership roles and leading and managing a team of people. I think would be quite an interesting point.
Yeah, no, that's good. We've touched on leadership in one of our other events, but we have got a great speaker that's on that. I'm sure. Well, Kat's great at that kind of topic as well, but we have got a leadership consultant. So yeah, and there's other people who are happy to speak on that type of topic. So leadership is a big one, because sometimes people get put into leadership roles, or they want to get to leadership roles, but then actually managing a team is a different ball game, isn't it? It's like, whoa, when you get all sorts of people, don't you? So it's how to effectively manage a team without micromanaging them, but making sure that they're on track and positive and feel part of the team as well.
Yeah, and diversity within teams that you manage as well is a really key point for me. So yeah, I think there's lots of elements to leadership, isn't there? But it's always a key area that I'm interested in learning more about.
So I put together a session for our academy around diversity and inclusion, and we covered off unconscious bias, groupthink, peer pressure, all those sorts of things. That I wonder whether that would be of interest to you ladies.
Yeah, it would be to me. I mean, just as a complete aside, I was WhatsApp chatting with a new colleague of mine yesterday, and I told him to Google countries with female leaders that are doing well, because I'd read something and I couldn't remember the article that I'd read, but I know that it was about how all countries that had female leaders were actually doing really well. Now, the results that came up last night was obviously about the coronavirus. And if you read the stats for all the countries that have got female prime ministers or presidents, their stats are so much lower than everybody else's. New Zealand, Belgium, Germany, you know, all the rest of it. And it's just sometimes it's getting over that sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? The fact that, you know, you are the woman, I've still got to go and cook all the meals and look after the children and do my job and be expected to do everything fine, and whereas the men aren't. And you talk about trying to sort of talk with the higher managerial execs. They're of that generation. The trouble is, the generation that's coming up behind them is the same. They might say they're not, but they are. Sorry, I've gone on for a rant a bit. I'll shut up.
Yeah, I would agree, and that's a really interesting topic. You know, that how do you balance that professional life, and, you know, if you're a parent, you know, managing sort of childcare issues or managing a home, and if you're not a parent, then it's about, you know, managing your, you know, perhaps elderly relatives, your parents, you know, looking after them and other dependents, and actually having a life as well, because, you know, we're not all parents necessarily, but, you know, you still want to have a life, and that's an important part of being a balanced person. So I think that, yeah, that's an interesting topic.
We had the session last time, wasn't it, Jo, around work-life integration, and the lady she has a cruise in triathlons, wasn't she, and she had been today and but it's definitely touched on another viewpoint moving forward, so it's not a problem. Well, thank you everyone, and appreciate the feedback, and thank you for taking part. It was great that even though it's virtual, you all spoke and kind of got involved, so thank you, and thank you again to Kat.
Pleasure.
Definitely.
Bye.
Thanks all.
Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.